They demanded everything in court. The house, the company, my life. The judge, their old friend, ridiculed my case and called me a naive fool who believed in family. I slowly said a few words. His face turned pale as if he had seen a ghost. Silence fell over the room, and a real horror began for the traitors. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. I signed the last page with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear, from something closer to pride, maybe even joy. 30 years I'd built Gibson and Associates from nothing, and now I was giving 40% of it to my daughter and her husband. The notary, a pleasant woman named Mrs. Chun, smiled across her mahogany desk. "Congratulations, Mr. Gibson," she said, stamping the final document. "This is quite a generous gift." I looked at Eunice, my daughter, sitting beside Stuart. She was 36 now, but I still saw glimpses of the girl who'd helped me organize files in my first tiny office above a dry cleaner. "Family comes first," I told Mrs. Chun. "Always has, always will." Stuart reached across and shook my hand, his grip firm, his smile bright. "We won't forget this, Hyman. Promise." The papers felt substantial in my hands as Mrs. Chun slid them into a leather portfolio. $800,000. That's what the firm was worth according to the valuation. Eunice would get over $300,000 in equity. She'd earned it. I thought 12 years working alongside me, managing accounts, building client relationships. This was her reward. Their 10th wedding anniversary was next week. What better gift than security? "I've been thinking about this moment for months," I said as we stood to leave. "You two deserve this." Eunice reached across and touched my hand. Her fingers were warm. "Daddy, you've always been so good to us." Outside, March sunshine broke through Philadelphia's typical overcast. My car was parked beside Stuart's new BMW. They were doing well, clearly. I'd always made sure Eunice had a good salary. $95,000 a year plus bonuses. More than fair for her role. "Come to the house," I said. "I made dinner. We should celebrate properly." They exchanged a glance I couldn't quite read. Then Stuart nodded. "Sounds perfect." The drive to Chestnut Hill took 25 minutes. I spent it replaying the signing ceremony, feeling that warm glow of having done something right, something lasting. My phone sat silent in the cup holder. No calls from clients, no emergencies, just a peaceful afternoon that would lead into a perfect evening. My house, a 3-bedroom colonial I'd bought 15 years ago, looked particularly welcoming in the late afternoon light. The dining room table was already set. I'd spent the morning preparing their favorite herb-roasted chicken, garlic potatoes, a salad with pecans and cranberries. The wine was breathing on the sideboard. "You've outdone yourself," Stuart said, surveying the spread. Eunice sat down without comment, but she was smiling. That had to mean something. I poured the wine, a California Chardonnay they'd mentioned liking. My hand was steady now. All that earlier emotion crystallized into simple happiness. "To family," I said, raising my glass. "To the future. To what we deserve," Stuart replied. We drank. The wine was good, smooth. Everything felt right. "I've been thinking about the transition." I began cutting into the chicken. "We should probably set up a formal schedule. Go over the client portfolios together. Make sure you're comfortable with 40%. Eunice's voice cut through my planning. Her tone had changed, gone flat and cold. I looked up. "What? 40%? That's what you think I'm worth?" The fork paused halfway to my mouth. "It's a gift worth over 300,000. Stuart interrupted, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "A gift? You've been exploiting your daughter for 12 years? The word hit me like a slap. "Exploiting? Eunice? You know that's not. You gave us scraps." Eunice wasn't looking at me now, wasn't touching my hand. She was staring at her wine glass, rotating it slowly. "I worked for pennies while you got rich. 95,000 a year is pennies." I heard my voice rise slightly, confusion bleeding into something sharper. "That's well above market rate for what she put up with." Stuart pushed his chair back. The scraping sound was harsh, deliberate. "Yes, pennies." I looked at my daughter, searching her face for recognition. for the connection we'd built over 36 years. She looked away. I don't understand, I said quietly. I just gave you. Stuart stood. He was tall, broader than me, and suddenly the dining room felt smaller. Here's what's happening, old man. You transfer everything, the house, the rest of the firm, or we take you to court. Your choice. The room tilted slightly. Or maybe it was me. Eunice, you agree with this? She finally met my eyes. Her expression was ice. I should have done this years ago. Done what? I've given you everything. A job, security, respect. You owed it to me, she said, and now we're collecting. Stuart moved toward the door. We want the house. We want the remaining 60%. You have 1 week to think about it, but we both know how this ends. Either you hand it over or we take you to court and make you look like the exploitative father you are. That's not true. None of that is. See you in court then. Stuart opened the front door. Eunice rose, leaving her napkin crumpled on the table. She didn't look back as she followed him out. The door closed. The house settled into silence. I sat there, the signed documents and the leather portfolio beside my plate. The dinner I'd spent the morning preparing was getting cold. My wine glass was still half full. Stuart's words echoed. Old man, Otis, see you in court. Eunice had called me daddy earlier at the notary's office. She touched my hand with warmth, or what I'd thought was warmth. I picked up the portfolio, opened it, looked at my signature at the bottom of each page, 40%. Given freely, with love, and they'd taken it as a down payment. The chicken on my plate had congealed, a thin layer of fat forming on the surface. Pushed it away. Outside, car engines started. I heard them drive away. First Stuart's BMW, then Eunice's sedan. The sound faded down the Trean Street. I'd believed in family, in generosity, in doing the right thing. The dining room suddenly felt enormous and empty. I counted the chairs. 4 of them, though only 3 had been used. The 4th sat pristine, waiting for a guest who would never come. Those words kept playing. You owed it to me. What had I created? What had I done? 2 weeks crawled past. I'd left those papers on the dining room table, unable to file them away, unable to look at them directly. Every morning I'd walk past and feel their weight, their accusation. I called Eunice 17 times. The calls went to voicemail. I sent texts asking to talk, to understand. No response, just silence, thick and deliberate. My regular lawyer, Tom Brennan, told me to wait. Maybe it's temporary anger, he'd said over the phone. Give them space. But I couldn't shake Stuart's words. See you in court. That hadn't sounded temporary. The courier arrived on a Thursday morning. I was reviewing client files in my study, trying to focus on work while my mind spun in circles. The doorbell's ring made me jump. Legal documents for Hyman Gibson, the courier said, holding out an envelope with an official seal. Sign here. I scrolled my name, took the envelope. It was heavy, substantial, the kind of weight that means trouble. This says. I scanned the first page, the formal language swimming before my eyes. My daughter is suing me. The courier shifted uncomfortably. I just deliver them, sir. Have a good day. He retreated to his van. I stood in my doorway, spring air brushing past me, reading words that couldn't be real. Gibson v. Gibson. Complaint for damages and equitable relief. Exploited. The word jumped from the page. I'd exploited Eunice by paying her $95,000 a year, by giving her flexibility when she needed it, by building something I'd hoped she'd inherit. The math didn't work. None of it worked. Total demand, the house worth $650,000, the remaining 60% of the firm worth roughly $480,000, over $1 million in assets for emotional and economic damages. I closed the door and walked to my study, spread the legal papers across my desk. Then I pulled out 12 years of payroll records. Numbers had always made sense to me. Numbers were clean, logical, provable. I organized everything chronologically. Every paycheck, every bonus, every benefit. Market rate for a senior accountant in Philadelphia was $60,000 to $70,000. I'd paid her 95 plus benefits, full health insurance, paid time off, flexibility when she needed to leave early. The evidence was overwhelming. Facts would win. They had to. Tom Brennan reviewed my documentation over the phone. It looks good, Hyman, he said, but his voice carried uncertainty. We'll present this at the preliminary hearing. When is that? 10 days. April 15th. I spent those 10 days building my defense, creating summaries, highlighting key numbers, organizing proof. My accountant's precision became both tool and shield. If I could just show the judge the truth, this would end. The courthouse was downtown, a limestone building that looked solid and permanent. I arrived 40 minutes early, my briefcase heavy with documentation. The security line moved slowly. People flowed past me. Lawyers in expensive suits. Families clustered on benches. Teenagers in handcuffs being escorted by guards. Then I saw them. Eunice and Stuart stood near the elevator with a man in a gray suit. Their lawyer, presumably. They were laughing about something. Stuart's hand rested on Eunice's shoulder, proprietary and confident. I walked toward them. Eunice. She looked past me, through me, as if I were transparent. Already gone. Eunice, can we please talk? Their lawyer stepped between us. Mr. Gibson, any communication should go through me. He handed me a business card. I didn't look at it. Stuart was smirking. See you in there, old man. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Judge Richard Palmer presided. A man in his mid-50s with silver hair and an expression of practiced boredom. Tom sat beside me at the defendant's table. Across the aisle, Eunice wouldn't meet my eyes. All rise. The bay finned. Palmer entered, settled into his chair, glanced at his notes. Gibson versus Gibson. Mr. Gibson. He looked at me with undisguised disdain. I've read your brief. Frankly, it's unconvincing. Tom stood. Your Honor, if we could present the salary records. You paid your daughter to work for you, Palmer interrupted. That doesn't erase exploitation. Above market rate, I said, unable to stay quiet. Significantly above. Palmer's gaze sharpened. Mr. Gibson, you exploited your daughter for years. She gave you her youth. This court recognizes emotional and economic damages. The phrasing was odd, too specific, too rehearsed, as if he'd written it before hearing any evidence. Eunice's lawyer stood, a thin man with predatory eyes. Your Honor, my client sacrificed her career prospects to build her father's business, receiving minimal compensation. Minimal? I couldn't help myself. That's not. Palmer slammed his gavel once. Mr. Gibson, you'll have your turn, though I suspect it won't change the fundamental facts. Tom touched my arm. A warning. I fell silent. The hearing continued for 40 minutes. Every time Tom tried to present my documentation, Palmer waved it away. I've reviewed the materials, counsel. Move on. But when Eunice's lawyer spoke, Palmer leaned forward, engaged, nodding. I watched Palmer's body language. When I spoke, he examined his fingernails in theatrical boredom. When Eunice's lawyer made arguments, Palmer's attention sharpened. Something was wrong here, something beyond bias. Palmer set another hearing date, issued temporary orders preventing me from selling any assets. We'll reconvene in 30 days to discuss final disposition, he said, then looking directly at me. Mr. Gibson, I suggest you consider settlement. The court is not inclined to rule in your favor. He hadn't heard our case, hadn't reviewed the evidence, but he'd already decided. The gavel came down. Adjourned. I stood in the corridor afterward, Tom beside me, discussing next steps, but I wasn't listening. I was watching Stuart and Palmer near the courtroom door. Stuart's hand briefly touched Palmer's shoulder. Casual, familiar, not the touch of strangers, the touch of friends. Tom left. I stood there, people flowing around me, trying to understand what I'd just seen. Stuart approached, that smirk still fixed on his face. You look confused, old man. The judge, I started. He didn't even look at my evidence. Of course, he didn't. Stuart laughed. Actually laughed. Rick's my boy from college. We go way back. Sigma Chi brothers. Think you ever had a chance in there? The corridor tilted. Rick? Judge Palmer. Yeah. Palmer and I used to close down bars together. Still meet for golf every few weeks. You lost before you walked in. Heyman thought you should know that. I couldn't find the words. That's illegal. Stuart leaned closer. Prove it. Oh wait, you can't. See you at the next hearing when we take your house. He walked away, rejoining Eunice. She looped her arm through his. They disappeared toward the elevator, celebrating. I made it to my car somehow. Sat in the driver's seat. Key in the ignition but not turning it. The parking lot emptied around me. Morning became noon. My phone buzzed with messages from my office. Client emergencies, questions about accounts. I couldn't make myself care. The legal papers sat in the passenger seat where I'd thrown them. Stuart's words looped endlessly. You lost before you walked in. He was right. I'd believed in fairness, in documentation, in truth. But they'd built a trap long before that notary's office, long before that dinner, and I'd walked into it, smiling, carrying signed documents, thinking I was being generous. The courthouse stood behind me, limestone and permanent, representing a system I'd trusted my entire life. A system that was rigged, bought, corrupted by old college friendships and backroom arrangements. I'd been a fool, a kind, generous, documented fool. But something was changing inside me, crystallizing like ice. I sat there until the parking lot was nearly empty, until the afternoon light started to slant, watching the spot where Eunice and Stuart had celebrated my destruction. They thought this was over. They were wrong. I spent 3 days looking at photographs. Eunice at 5 pulling her first lost tooth and grinning with that gap-toothed pride. At 10, winning the spelling bee while I cheered from the audience. At 16, awkward in her prom dress. At 25, graduating business school. Searching each image for the moment she became someone else. Or maybe searching for the moment I stopped seeing who she really was. The photos didn't answer. They never do. Those legal papers still sat in my car, untouched since the parking lot. I couldn't bring myself to retrieve them. They'd become evidence of my foolishness, and I wasn't ready to file them away with my other mistakes. On the 4th morning after the courthouse, I found myself in my study, staring at old, firm records. Not intentionally, more like muscle memory, an accountant's instinct when the world stops making sense. Numbers had always been reliable, clean, honest. I pulled the previous year's quarterly reports, flipped through transaction logs without really looking, seeking comfort in familiar columns, familiar patterns. Then something caught my eye. Travel reimbursement, November 2023, Boston conference. Amount $4,200 paid to Eunice. But I'd been at that conference alone. Eunice had called in sick that week. I remembered because I'd phoned to check on her. Brought soup when I returned. My pen circled the entry before my brain fully processed what I was seeing. I pulled more records. January 2024, consulting bonus to Stuart Callahan, $3,800. Not approved by the board. I would have remembered approving it. March 2024, another travel reimbursement. Seattle. Eunice hadn't gone to Seattle. April, $5,000 in expense reimbursements for client entertainment. No receipts attached. The patterns emerge like shapes in fog, gradually solidifying. Small amounts. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger alerts during quarterly reviews. Under $5,000 each time, but frequent, consistent, deliberate. I spent the next week systematically reviewing 18 months of financial records, created spreadsheets tracking every suspicious transaction, built timelines, charted patterns. My study wall became a physical map of digital crime. Printed statements, index cards connected by string, highlighted passages forming a web. $47,000 over 14 months. Not massive, but criminal, and more importantly, proof of premeditation. This wasn't spontaneous greed following my gift. This was a long con. They'd been positioning themselves, stealing incrementally, building justification for their eventual demand. The gift wasn't the beginning. It was the culmination. They'd studied me, learned my blind spots, my quarterly review schedule, my trust in family, my accountant's focus on patterns large enough to matter, missing the death of 1,000 small cuts. I sat back in my chair, the spreadsheet glowing on my laptop screen. They hunted me, I said aloud to the empty room. This wasn't spontaneous. This was a plan. The words echoed against family photos on the wall. Not a naive father, not a fool. Prey. But prey can become predator. The distinction mattered because it meant this wasn't about me being wrong. It was about them being criminals. That changed everything. I needed a different kind of lawyer, not Tom Brennan with his uncertainty and gentle suggestions, someone who specialized in corporate warfare, someone who understood forensic accounting. Research took 2 days. Daniel Kowalski's name appeared repeatedly in business litigation cases. Specialty: corporate disputes with financial complexity. Background: Big Four accounting firm before law school. Current rate $350 per hour. Expensive, but I wasn't looking for cheap. Kowalski and Associates. A professional voice answered. I need a corporate lawyer, I said. Specifically, someone who understands forensic accounting. What's the situation? Family business dispute, but it's not what you think. I have documentation of embezzlement spanning 14 months. Brief pause. That changes things. When can you come in? The drive to Daniel's office took 40 minutes through Philadelphia traffic. His building was downtown, glass and steel, the kind of place that charges premium rent. His office on the 12th floor matched. Sleek furniture, legal degrees from Penn, wall of case wins. Daniel Kowalski was younger than I expected. Mid-40s, sharp suit, expression that managed professional sympathy without actual emotion. I placed a 3 inches folder on his desk, organized with tabs and color-coded highlights. He picked it up, tested its weight, looked surprised. You compiled this yourself. I'm an accountant. Was an accountant. Still own the firm for now. He spent 20 minutes reviewing while I waited. His expression shifted from skeptical to interested to impressed. This is thorough work, Mr. Gibson. He closed the folder, but we have a problem. The 40% I already gave them. Exactly. You transferred ownership without clawback provisions, without conditions tied to performance or conduct. That complicates any action we take. But I still own 60% controlling interest. True. Daniel leaned forward. What are you proposing? Emergency board meeting. Freeze dividend distributions. Initiate full financial audit. Use my majority control to force transparency. They'll sue immediately. Claim you're retaliating, hurting the business, acting in bad faith. I know. I met his eyes. I'm counting on it. You're counting on being sued. They've been stealing from client accounts. An audit exposes that. Let them explain it in court. Daniel studied me for a long moment. That's aggressive. Your daughter will be implicated. She is implicated. She did it. I'm just documenting what already happened. Another pause. This will get expensive. Ugly. Are you sure? I thought about Stewart's smirk in the courthouse corridor. Palmer's dismissive wave. Uneunice looking through me like I didn't exist. Mr. Kowalski. They wanted to play financial games with a man who built a business over 30 years. Yes, I'm sure. He nodded slowly. All right. I'll draw up the board meeting notice. You'll need to personally deliver it to all members, including Uneunice and Stewart, including them. They have to be notified as board members. Can you do that? I stood, picked up my folder. I can do what needs to be done. Outside, walking through Philadelphia's business district toward the parking garage, I caught my reflection in a glass building facade. Barely recognized myself. Thinner, older. The past month had carved lines I didn't remember having. But there was something else in that reflection. Focus. Purpose. The legal papers in my briefcase weren't wounds anymore. They were weapons. I had work to do. The week between meeting Daniel and the board meeting was preparation. Filing notices, reviewing bylaws, rehearsing what I'd say. Daniel warned me to stay clinical. Avoid emotional language. You're exercising fiduciary responsibility, not punishing your daughter. Remember that distinction. I arrived at Gibson and Associates 40 minutes early. My firm, my conference room, my rules. The conference table could seat 12. I placed a formal agenda at each position, printed, numbered, legally proper, evidence that this wasn't emotion. This was procedure. Daniel arrived next carrying his leather portfolio. He nodded approval at the setup. The other board members trickled in, Marcus Chen and Patricia Valdez. Longtime business associates who looked uncomfortable about being pulled into family drama. They took seats far from the head of the table. Eunice and Stuart arrived last, radiating hostility. "What is this, Heyman?" Stuart demanded, not sitting. "Some kind of power play. Emergency board meeting properly noticed per company bylaws. Please sit." "I don't take orders from Daniel's voice cut clean. Mr. Callahan, as a board member, you're required to attend properly noticed meetings. You can participate or leave, but the meeting proceeds either way." Stuart sat, glaring. "This is pathetic." I opened the agenda, kept my voice level. First item. I'm proposing immediate suspension of all dividend distributions pending completion of comprehensive financial audit. Stuart's hand slammed the table. The sound echoed. Everyone flinched except me. "You can't do that. As majority shareholder with 60% control, I can and am." Eunice leaned forward. Her voice tried for warmth. It didn't reach. "Dad, this is you're hurting us financially. Miss Gibson." I didn't call her Eunice. "If the firm's finances are sound, an audit will prove that. Unless there's something concerning hidden in those finances." "Are you accusing?" Stuart started. "I'm proposing an audit. Standard business practice. All in favor?" My 60% carried it. Marcus and Patricia voted with me. They had to legally. Stuart and Eunice's 40% meant nothing. For the first time since signing those transfer documents, I felt control returning. Stuart stood, chair scraping back. "Fine. Freeze the dividends. We'll see you back in court tomorrow." "That's your right. You think you're clever? Using corporate bylaws against your own daughter?" "I think I'm exercising my responsibilities as majority owner, which incidentally I became after giving 40% to you as a gift." Stuart's face reened. "Worst mistake you ever made. We agree on something." They left. The conference room door slammed hard enough to rattle the framed licenses on the wall. Daniel started packing his materials. That went as expected. "They'll file emergency motions within 24 hours. "How fast?" "Tomorrow probably." He was optimistic. Stuart filed within 6 hours. The notification came via email that evening. Emergency motion claiming economic abuse, retaliatory punishment, destroying daughter's livelihood, requesting immediate restraining order against my corporate actions and appointment of independent manager to run firm during lawsuit. Emergency hearings scheduled for next morning. Palmer's courtroom, of course. We arrived at the courthouse prepared. Daniel had our response brief, the embezzlement evidence, corporate bylaws highlighted. Different emotional space for me this time. I had strategy now, documentation, professional counsel backing every move. Palmer's courtroom felt smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd grown larger, less easily diminished. Eunice's lawyer painted me as vindictive father, weaponizing business ownership to punish his loving daughter. Palmer nodded along, making notes. When Daniel stood to present our evidence, Palmer didn't look up. "Your Honor, we have evidence of embezzlement that directly explains Mr. Gibson's corporate actions." "Counselor, this isn't a criminal trial. The motion concerns economic abuse. The two are connected. If Ms. Gibson and Mr. Callahan were stealing from client accounts," Palmer's gavel came down sharp. "That's not relevant to this motion. Mr. Gibson froze assets to punish his daughter. That's retaliatory and abusive." Daniel half rose. "With respect, Your Honor, protecting corporate assets from theft is neither retaliatory nor abusive. Your objection is noted and overruled. The pattern here is clear. A vindictive father weaponizing business ownership." I watched Palmer's face. No uncertainty there. No consideration. He decided before we entered. "I'm granting the emergency motion," Palmer continued. "All actions taken by Mr. Gibson regarding Gibson and Associates are hereby suspended. An independent manager, Mr. Robert Chun, will assume operational control pending resolution of the underlying lawsuit." Daniel tried once more. "Your Honor, may I ask Mr. Chen's qualifications?" "He's a certified financial manager with extensive experience, and his relationship to this court." Palmer's expression went cold. "Are you implying something, Counselor?" "I'm asking a procedural question. He has no relationship to this court. Next matter. The gavel dismissed us. In the hallway, Daniel was already on his phone, furious. Professional composure cracking. I'm filing judicial misconduct complaints. That was blatant bias. I pulled out my own phone, searched Robert Chun, Philadelphia financial manager. The results loaded. Robert Chun, married to Susan Palmer. I kept searching. Susan Palmer, maiden name, Reeves. Judge Catherine Reeves. Palmer, the judge's wife. Sisters. I showed Daniel the screen. Robert Chun, married to Susan Palmer, Judge Palmer's wife's sister-in-law. Daniel stared. He appointed his wife's cousin. That's brazen. That's how confident he is. He's not even hiding it anymore. This is grounds for immediate misconduct complaint, maybe even removal. File it. I pocketed my phone. But Palmer won't stop because of complaints. He'll stop when we expose the whole network. Stewart's voice carried down the corridor, loud and performative. Judge Palmer, thank you for seeing through the manipulation. My wife was devastated by her father's actions. Palmer smiled, waved it off. Just doing my job, son. Protecting families from financial abuse. They shook hands warmly. Two friends in a public space, not bothering to hide their connection. Eunice walked past me toward the exit. For a brief moment our eyes met. Something flickered there. Not guilt exactly, but discomfort. She knew this was wrong. The corruption was too obvious, even for self-serving blindness. But she kept walking. Daniel and I ended up on the courthouse steps. Afternoon sun beating down, traffic flowing past on Market Street. We'll appeal, Daniel said, already strategizing. File judicial misconduct complaint. Request different judge. This kind of corruption. We can fight it. How long? Appeals? Months minimum. Misconduct investigation could be a year. They'll own everything by then. House, business, every asset I spent 30 years building. Which is why we fight this aggressively. Discovery, depositions, exposing every connection between Palmer and Stewart. Palmer and Chin. I watched a bus pull away from the curb. Normal people going to normal jobs, trusting that systems worked, that courts were fair, that judges followed the law. Do it, I said. File everything. But we need something faster, something they can't manipulate through Palmer. Like what? I didn't answer because I didn't know yet. But standing on those courthouse steps, watching Stewart and Eunice drive away in their expensive car, bought with firm money, my money, laughing like they'd won some kind of game. I understood something fundamental. The system wasn't just broken. It was actively working against me. Palmer wasn't an obstacle. He was their weapon. We need more than grounds for appeal, I said quietly. We need evidence they can't ignore. Proof so clear that even corrupt judges can't dismiss it. Daniel looked at me, recognizing something in my tone. What are you thinking? I'm thinking 47,000 in documented theft isn't enough. We need the whole picture. Every connection, every payment, every lie. That could take months of investigation. Then we'd better start now. My phone buzzed. Robert Chen, the independent manager, had already changed the locks at my firm. I was shut out of my own business. They thought this was over. Thought I'd accept defeat like I'd accepted the gift signing, the lawsuit, the first courthouse humiliation. They were wrong. For days after the courthouse defeat, I sat in a cafe. 2 blocks from where Palmer had destroyed me again. The coffee had gone cold hours ago. Condensation ring marking end time on the scarred wooden table. I'd watched the ring form, expand, merge with others. 3 hours, maybe 4. Hard to track when nothing mattered. Daniel had called that morning. Another emergency motion denied. Different judge this time, but same result, deferred to Judge Palmer's discretion. The legal language for we won't contradict our colleague, even when he's wrong. Robert Chen had changed the locks at Gibson and Associates, my firm. 30 years building it, and now I couldn't walk through the front door. Mr. Gibson. I looked up. A woman around 60 stood beside my table. Confident posture, sharp eyes behind practical glasses. Do I know you? Irene Walsh. We worked together briefly 15 years ago. I was the auditor on the Brennan manufacturing account. Vague memories surfaced. Professional woman, thorough work, asked good questions. That's a long time ago. If you're looking for accounting services, I'm not. She sat without invitation. I was in the courthouse gallery yesterday. I saw Palmer dismiss your case. My jaw tightened. Then you saw me lose again. I saw a corrupt judge protect his friends while destroying an honest man. Her tone wasn't sympathetic. It was clinical, observational. Palmer is corrupt. Everyone in legal circles knows it. No one can prove it. I filed complaints. My lawyer has filed complaints. How long until those are reviewed? I looked back at my cold coffee. 18 months, maybe longer. In 18 months, Palmer will have transferred everything you own to your daughter and her husband. You'll have nothing left to fight for. The words hit harder because they were true. So what do you suggest? I don't have 18 months. Then we find evidence they can't ignore. Evidence that forces immediate action. Something in her certainty penetrated the fog. Why would you help me? You don't know me. She paused, studying me. Then I know what it's like to lose everything to corrupt people who smile while they rob you. What happened? Business partners embezzled from my consulting firm. When I discovered it, they used a corrupt lawyer to flip the case. Made me look like the criminal. I lost my business, my reputation. 2 years of my life fighting it. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be smart. Her voice sharpened. I learned how they operate, how to find what they hide. I can help you out, but only if you're willing to fight. I should have walked away. Should have stayed in my comfortable defeat. But something she'd said caught in my mind. Evidence they can't ignore. What kind of evidence? The kind hiding in public records, corporate filings, business registrations, financial disclosures. She leaned forward. You have information Palmer's afraid of. You just don't know which information. I thought back to that first hearing. When I'd mentioned financial records, Palmer's face had changed. Brief fear before contempt returned. At the time, I thought I had imagined it. What was I about to say? I asked slowly. What did he think I knew? Irene smiled. Not warmth, satisfaction. That's the question we need to answer. I followed her to her office in Old City, a converted dining room in a brownstone apartment. Whiteboard on one wall, filing cabinets along another, desk covered in organized chaos, professional space carved from personal life. I've been tracking Palmer's cases for 3 years, she said. Pulling folders from a cabinet since my own case made me understand how the system breaks. She spread documents across her desk, court records, highlighted passages, handwritten notes. 23 cases flagged over 5 years where Palmer ruled against clear evidence. Notice the pattern. She pointed to names. Same network of people favored repeatedly. Stewart's business associates. Palmer's country club members. Social circle overlap. I leaned closer. My accountants I engaging despite exhaustion. These cases Palmer ruled against documentation in everyone. Exactly. But watch his behavior in the transcripts. Notice when he gets uncomfortable. I scanned the highlighted sections. In case after case, when litigants mention corporate documents or business filings or financial disclosures, Palmer's language shifted, became dismissive, angry even. He fears public records, I said quietly. Why would a judge fear public records? Because his name is in them. The next few days blurred together. Irene and I worked daily at her office reviewing every Palmer case we could access, built comprehensive timeline, tracked his rulings against evidence patterns, created physical map on her whiteboard, dates, cases, connections drawn with different colored markers. The pattern became undeniable. Palmer didn't just bend law occasionally. He ran systematic operation. We need professional investigator, Irene said on the 4th day. Someone who can follow financial trails legally, document everything court quality. That's expensive. How expensive is losing everything? She recommended Sarah Chun, former IRS investigator, now private. Specialty, financial fraud. Rate, $150 per hour. I called from Irene's office, my hand steadier than it had been in weeks. Miss Chun, Irene Walsh recommended you. I need a financial investigator. What's the situation? Professional voice, no wasted words, corrupt judge, questionable business connections, need documentation that will stand up to scrutiny. That's my specialty. My rate is $150 an hour. Minimum 10 hours upfront. $1,500. Money was tight, dividends cut off, legal fees mounting. But Irene was right. This was investment. When can you start? Today. Send me names, businesses, dates. I'll have preliminary findings in a week. After the call, I sat back in Irene's desk chair. For the first time since signing those transfer documents, I felt something other than despair. Not hope, purpose. Irene made fresh coffee, real stuff from a French press. She handed me a mug, steam rising between us. They made a mistake, you know, she said. What mistake? They assumed you'd stay broken. That after losing twice in Palmer's courtroom, you'd accept defeat. I was broken. I am broken. No. She met my eyes. You were shocked. There's a difference. Shock wears off. Then you remember who you are. And who am I? Someone who built a business over 30 years through precision and persistence. Those skills don't disappear because a corrupt judge issues bad rulings. You just need to apply them differently. I looked at the whiteboard. Palmer's name at center, lines connecting to Stewart, Robert Chun, others we hadn't identified yet. Web of corruption becoming visible. The coffee was good. First thing that tasted right in weeks. 1 week, I said. Then we see what Sarah found. Outside, evenings settled over Philadelphia. Inside Irene's office, surrounded by evidence and possibility, I felt something I'd forgotten existed. Direction. The week waiting for Sarah's report was productive. Irene and I compiled every Palmer case we could access, built comprehensive timeline, but we needed the financial connection. Sarah was tracking the smoking gun that would end Palmer's career. Sarah arrived at Irene's office on a Thursday morning carrying a leather portfolio thick with documents. I found the connection, she said, no preamble. It's worse than you thought. How bad? She spread documents across Irene's desk. Corporate registrations, business filings, bank records obtained legally through public databases and disclosure requirements. Judge Palmer owns 30% of Stewart's consulting firm. Has since the company was registered 18 months ago. Irene leaned forward sharply. That's direct conflict of interest. He can't hear cases involving that business. He's heard 5 cases involving Stewart's business associates in the past year alone, including yours. Sarah's finger traced through bank records. Look at this. Stewart paid himself from a company Palmer co-owns. They're just moving money in a circle. I studied the numbers. My accountant's training taking over. But look at the dates. Exactly. Sarah nodded. Stewart received payment of $4,200 the same week Palmer issued the temporary order blocking your corporate actions. Another 15,002 days after Palmer appointed Robert Chun as manager. Payments correlate to rulings, Irene said quietly. Every single time. Sarah flipped through more records. 84,700 over 2 years. That's not consulting fees. That's bribery disguised as business income. The evidence was overwhelming. Palmer's ownership hidden under shell company name, but corporate records showed him as beneficial owner. Public records, legally obtained, court-quality documentation. This ends him, I said. Palmer's career is over. We spent the next 3 days assembling comprehensive evidence package, business registrations showing Palmer's ownership, bank records showing payments to Stewart, timeline correlating payments to my case milestones, list of other cases Palmer ruled on involving Stewart's business associates, everything sourced legally, everything documentable. Daniel joined via conference call to review strategy. This is extraordinary evidence. We file with Judicial Conduct Board immediately. Motion for recusal simultaneously. How fast can they act? I asked. For something this documented emergency review, maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks. After months of suffering, 2 weeks seemed manageable. I can wait 2 weeks. Assuming Palmer and Stewart don't discover we have this, Irene cautioned. Keep it quiet until we file, Daniel said. The moment this hits the court system, it becomes public record. But we'd been too visible. Robert Chin, managing my firm, had noticed something. Heyman Gibson wasn't fighting for access anymore. Wasn't calling. Wasn't protesting. Just gone. Stewart got paranoid. What's the old man doing? He had someone watch me. Saw me meeting repeatedly with Irene and Sarah at Irene's office. Didn't know specifics, but knew I was planning something. The counterattack came on Friday afternoon. Legal notice arrived via email while we were reviewing final evidence assembly. I opened it on my phone, read the first paragraph, felt my stomach drop. "What is it?" Irene asked. Seeing my expression, I handed her the phone without speaking. Emergency petition claiming Heyman Gibson was mentally incompetent, citing paranoid behavior, irrational accusations against sitting judge, inability to manage finances, requesting immediate psychiatric evaluation, and temporary guardianship, giving Stewart and Unionist control of all my assets, including my house. Palmer had already granted emergency hearing, ordered evaluation scheduled for next week. They're trying to declare me insane. I couldn't process it. Irene read quickly, jaw tightening. This is desperate move. They're scared. Doesn't feel like desperation. Feels like they're winning. My phone rang. Daniel, already aware of the filing. "Mr. Gibson, you cannot fight this evaluation." His voice was urgent. "If you resist, it looks like paranoia. If you argue about Palmer's corruption during evaluation, it looks like delusion. You have to go. Be calm. Answer normally and pass the evaluation. What if they've paid off the psychiatrist? Then we appeal, but we have no choice. Fighting makes you look guilty." After he hung up, I sat in Irene's office, surrounded by evidence that could destroy Palmer, but unable to use it until I proved I was sane to a stranger who might be compromised. The trap was perfect. Defend myself. Look paranoid. Stay silent. Lose everything. "They're panicking," Irene said, pulling a chair beside mine. "This mental incompetence filing is desperation because you're thinking short-term. Week from now, you pass the evaluation. 2 weeks after that, we file evidence that destroys Palmer's career. A month from now, this is over. A month is a long time when you're standing on the edge. Then don't look down." Her hand covered mine briefly. "Look forward. We have the evidence. We have the plan. We just need you to stay standing long enough to use it. And if I can't, you can. You've survived this long. One more evaluation, then we end them." I looked at her desk, 2 folders side by side. One contained evidence against Palmer, career-ending, criminal corruption documented in public records. Other contained psychiatric evaluation order could end my legal personhood with single doctor's opinion. Everything we'd worked for trapped behind this one test. "One step at a time," Irene said quietly. "Pass the evaluation first. What if they've already won? What if they've closed every door? Then we find a window. That's what survivors do." Outside, evening darkened over Philadelphia. Traffic sounds drifted up from the street. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that corruption operated in plain sight, that judges sold justice, that daughters betrayed fathers. Sarah had left hours ago, her work complete. Daniel would file the complaints the moment I passed evaluation. Everything was ready except me. I had to walk into a room with a psychiatrist who might be honest or might be bought. Had to discuss my daughter's betrayal without seeming bitter. Had to explain a judge's corruption without seeming paranoid. Had to appear rational while describing an irrational situation. Had to perform sanity while everything I knew to be true sounded like delusion. Irene's hand still rested near mine on the desk. Not quite touching now, but close presence without pressure. 1 hour, she said. That's all the evaluation will take. 1 hour of being completely calm and normal. In other words, act like my daughter didn't betray me and a judge isn't trying to steal my life. Exactly. For 1 hour, you need to be the man you were before any of this happened. I wasn't sure that man still existed, but I'd find him or fake him well enough to pass because the alternative was giving them everything without a fight. The week before the evaluation was torture. Irene drilled me on responses. Calm, rational, no mention of Palmer's corruption. Daniel sent guidelines. Appear cooperative. Don't seem defensive. Act like a man grieving family betrayal. Not paranoid about conspiracies, even though it was conspiracy. Dr. Melissa Tawz's waiting room was generic, professional, beige walls, motivational posters, magazines nobody reads. I sat reviewing mental notes. Everything depended on the next hour. Mr. Gibson, the receptionist, called. Deep breath. I stood. Dr. Torres's office was warmer than expected. Psychology credentials on the wall, comfortable chairs, natural light through large windows. She was mid-40s, competent demeanor, direct but kind. Mr. Gibson, I've reviewed the court filing. She gestured to papers on her desk. It claims you're demonstrating paranoid behavior and are unable to manage your finances. How would you respond to that? Careful. Exactly. As Irene coached, I'd say I'm dealing with a difficult family situation and legal challenges which causes stress but doesn't impair my judgment. Tell me about these legal challenges. My daughter and her husband sued me after I gave them a substantial gift. They want more. The court proceedings have been frustrating. Frustrating how the judge has ruled against me consistently, even when I believe the facts support my position. She made notes, asked about my background, my business, my mental health history. I answered carefully. Yes, I was stressed. Who wouldn't be? Yes, I was hurt by my daughter's betrayal. No, I wasn't suicidal or delusional. Focused on facts, not emotions. As the evaluation progressed, her expression shifted from neutral professional to puzzled concern. She reviewed the court filing again, then looked at me directly. Mr. Gibson, I need to be direct with you. I've conducted hundreds of competency evaluations. You're presenting as cognitively intact, emotionally balanced, and capable of rational decision-making. Then why am I here? That's my question. The filing describes behavior I'm not observing. No paranoia, no impaired judgment, no inability to manage affairs. Quite the opposite. You're articulate, organized, and your emotional responses are proportional to the situation. Something loosened in my chest. So, your report will say I'm competent. My report will say allegations are unfounded, and you present no evidence of incapacity. She paused. Frankly, this seems like misuse of the evaluation process. I called Irene from the parking lot, hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. It's done, she says. I'm fine. Better than fine. She's questioning why the evaluation was ordered at all. That's exactly what we needed. Relief flooded her voice. Can she have the report filed today? She said within 48 hours. It'll be unambiguous. Then we move. Get back here. Time to file everything we've prepared. I'm on my way, Irene. Thank you for all of it. Thank me after we win. I drove to her office through afternoon traffic. The city looked different somehow, sharper, more real, like I'd been seeing through fog for months, and it had finally cleared. Daniel joined via video call when I arrived. His face filled Irene's laptop screen. We hit them on 3 fronts simultaneously, he said. Judicial ethics complaint, civil lawsuit for embezzlement, IRS report for tax fraud. How fast can you file? Ethics complaint today. Lawsuit tomorrow morning. IRS report is anonymous tip. I'll submit tonight. Irene leaned forward. What's the timeline on ethics investigation for something this documented? They'll open investigation within a week. Preliminary hearing within a month. A month. I absorbed this. Palmer has been destroying my life for 3 months. 1 more month. I can wait. Daniel's expression grew serious. I need you both to understand. This will get uglier before it's over. Stuart and Eunice will panic, file more lawsuits, make more accusations. Let them. My voice came out colder than I expected. Every action they take creates more evidence of their behavior. They might go public, try to destroy your reputation before we can prove the corruption. Then we'll prove it faster. Daniel, I'm done being careful. We have evidence that's court-proof. File everything. All right, but you're committed at that point. No backing down. I've been committed since the moment they betrayed me. After Daniel signed off, Irene and I worked late, finalizing documents. Coffee went cold in our cups. City lights appeared in the window as afternoon became evening. The conversation shifted, became personal in the quiet spaces between strategy. When I lost my business, Irene said, pushing her reading glasses up to rub her eyes, I thought I'd never trust anyone professionally again. Did you trust again? I learned to trust myself. To trust evidence and documentation rather than promises. It's lonely but safer. I understand that. I stared at the whiteboard covered in Palmer's connections. After Sarah died, my wife, I stopped letting people close. Built walls without realizing it. Are the walls still there? Some of them. I met her eyes. But working with you these past weeks, it's different. I'm not alone in the fight. No, you're not alone. The moment stretched. Not quite romantic, but something shifting between us. Partnership becoming something more. As I prepared to leave, Irene walked me to the door. Brief hesitation. You know you're not alone in this anymore, right? Whatever happens, you have someone in your corner. I know. I don't think I could have survived this without you. Not just the strategy, the partnership. Partnership. Small smile. That's a good word for it. For now. For now. Go home. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow we change everything. I drove home through Philadelphia streets. City passing by windows. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. Tomorrow we filed everything. Tomorrow the real fight began. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because the fight was over, but because I was finally fighting back on my terms. The next morning, Irene and I gathered at her office. Daniel appeared on video call, his face serious but anticipatory. Ready? He asked. Once I file, there's no pulling back. File it. His finger hovered over his mouse, then clicked. Ethics complaint submitted. Judicial Conduct Board will have it within the hour. 47 pages documenting Palmer's ownership in Stewart's firm. $84,000 in payments, timeline of 23 bias cases, corporate records, bank statements, everything meticulously sourced and footnoted. Civil lawsuit, Irene prompted. Another click filed. Stewart and Ununis will be served tomorrow. And the IRS tip anonymous Form 3949A submitted last night. It's in their system. 3 weapons launched simultaneously. Then we wait, I said, and prepare for retaliation. The next few days crawled by. Daniel explained the timeline. Judicial Conduct Board would review the complaint, verify it met filing requirements, then notify Palmer, and open preliminary investigation. Civil lawsuit would be served within 48 hours. IRS moved slowly, but the report was logged. Irene and I monitored news, checked court filings obsessively. The anticipation was worse than previous defeats because now we were vulnerable to retaliation. 5 days after filing, Palmer received formal notice from the Judicial Conduct Board, named an ethics complaint alleging financial conflicts of interest, bias, and corruption. Must respond within 30 days. Preliminary investigation opened immediately given evidence quality. I imagined him in his chambers reading the complaint, realizing it was comprehensive. Had his financial records, Stewart's payments, everything, seeing my name as complainant. His fury must have been volcanic. A week after the filings, I had to appear for routine scheduling, hearing on a different matter. Palmer was still technically assigned to my case, though that would change. Daniel came with me. In the courthouse hallway before the hearing, Palmer approached. Breach of protocol, but he was beyond caring. Other people were present, but he spoke loud enough for me to hear, quiet enough for deniability. Mr. Gibson, you're making serious accusations against a sitting judge. Oldman would have stayed silent, intimidated. New Heyman looked him directly in the eyes. I filed a complaint with proper authorities. That's my legal right. Palmer stepped closer, invading my space. Physical intimidation. You're playing with fire. People who accuse judges sometimes lose more than lawsuits. I didn't step back, held my ground. Your Honor, if there's an ethics concern, that's between you and the Conduct Board, not me. We'll see what they find. Baseless accusations have consequences. I raised my voice slightly, not shouting, but clear and audible, creating witnesses. I have full confidence the board will review the evidence objectively and reach appropriate conclusions. Translation: clear. I have proof, and threatening me just creates more evidence. Other attorneys in the hallway had noticed our interaction. Palmer realized his mistake. Confronting me publicly showed concern. Maybe guilt. He tried to recover. We'll see what the board decides. But his voice lacked conviction. He turned, walked back toward the courtroom. Small crowd of attorneys and litigants pretending not to have watched. But they watched. Word would spread. That was either very brave or very reckless, Daniel whispered. Probably both, but I'm done being afraid of him. Same week, Stewart and Eunice were served with civil lawsuit. Allegations: embezzlement, fraudulent expenses, demanding 2 years of financial disclosure. Stewart's panic was immediate. He called a lawyer, not the one who'd filed their original suit. They needed a specialist now. The lawyer reviewed the lawsuit, saw it was well-crafted, evidence-supported, told them what they already knew. This is serious. Financial disclosure will reveal everything. If you took money improperly, it's going to come out. Stewart's response was predictable. More aggression. They hired a different lawyer this time. Aggressive litigator known for scorched earth tactics. Within a week, he filed countersuit. Heyman Gibson allegedly interfering with business operations, defaming Eunice and Stewart with baseless accusations, causing severe emotional distress. Demand $500,000 in damages. Desperate move trying to bury me in legal fees. Make me back down, but also strategic mistake. Every counterclaim created discovery opportunity. Daniel reviewed the countersuit over video call. It's weak. Typical intimidation tactic, but it will be expensive to defend. How expensive? Another $20,000 minimum. Maybe more if it goes to trial. I absorbed this. Money was tight. Firm income still cut off. Legal bills mounting. How much have I already spent on you? Approximately $32,000 since I took the case. That was most of my liquid savings. Irene's hand touched my arm. But you're not stopping. No, we finished this. The countersuit is desperate, she said. It means we're winning. Doesn't feel like winning. Feels like drowning in legal paper. That's their goal, Daniel said. But every claim they make creates discovery opportunities. We can subpoena their financial records, depose them under oath, force them to answer questions. How long until Palmer's preliminary hearing? 3 weeks. Judicial Conduct Board moves fast when evidence is this clear. 3 weeks. I can last 3 weeks. We all can, Irene said quietly. That evening, back at Irene's office, I stood at the whiteboard where our investigation timeline was mapped. Palmer's preliminary hearing scheduled for 3 weeks out. Stewart and Eunice's response to lawsuit due in 2 weeks. IRS audit might take months, but it was in motion. Everything was active now. No more waiting, no more defense. I turned to Irene. They think filing a $500,000 lawsuit will scare me into backing down. Will it? I've already lost my business, my daughter, my savings. They can't threaten me with losing what doesn't exist. But I can take back what they stole. 3 weeks until Palmer faces the board. Then we see if the system can still work, if evidence still matters. It has to, otherwise nothing means anything. It will. My finger traced the timeline forward on the whiteboard. I have to believe that. 3 weeks until consequences began. 3 weeks until we learned if justice still existed. 3 weeks passed. Those weeks were a blur of depositions, document requests, legal maneuvering. Stewart and Eunice's aggressive lawyer filed motion after motion, trying to delay, deflect, overwhelm. But Daniel matched them filing for filing, and the Judicial Conduct Board worked independently, immune to Stewart's tactics. I was at Irene's office when Daniel called. It happened, he said. Judicial Conduct Board suspended Palmer pending investigation. He's off the bench, effective immediately. The news hit like electricity. Palmer, who'd seemed untouchable 3 months ago, was now suspended. All his cases being reassigned. Who gets my case? Judge Martha Brennan. 20 years on bench. Reputation for fairness. No connection to Palmer or Stewart. An honest judge. I've forgotten what that looked like. First hearing in 5 days. Those 5 days felt longer than the previous 3 weeks. Irene and I reviewed everything. Evidence of embezzlement. Stewart's unreported income. Timeline of Palmer's bias. But now presenting to someone who would actually read it. Different strategy entirely. Not fighting corruption. Presenting facts to someone who cared about facts. Judge Brennan's courtroom felt different immediately. Professional, focused, no visible bias. She'd clearly read everything. "Help me understand your position, Mr. Callahan," she opened, addressing Stuart directly. "Your father-in-law gave you 40% of his business as a gift. Now you're suing for his house and remaining 60%. Explain the legal basis." Stuart tried his manipulation tactics, emotional appeals, attacking my character. Brennan cut him off. "That's not an answer to my question." "Legal basis, counselor." Stuart's lawyer struggled. "Without Palmer's bias, the case was naked, weak. I see a gift. Documented salary above market rate. No evidence of exploitation," Brennan noted. "I see subsequent lawsuit. Temporary orders from Judge Palmer. Now under ethics investigation. Help me see what I'm missing." Silence. They had nothing. First time in months I sat in a courtroom without feeling crushed by the system. Same week, Stuart received an IRS audit notice. Sarah Chen's tip had triggered investigation of his unreported consulting income. ARS wanted documentation of all business income 2023-2024. The $84,700 in consulting fees from Palmer's co-owned firm never declared tax liability, approximately $28,000 plus penalties. More critically, deliberate tax evasion was a federal crime. Prison time. Daniel called Stuart's lawyer with an offer. "Your clients withdraw all claims. Return 40% ownership. Pay Mr. Gibson's legal fees, $28,000. In exchange, we don't pursue criminal embezzlement charges or cooperate with IRS prosecution." That's extortion. That's negotiation. Your clients committed documentable crimes. We're offering them escape from prison. That evening, my phone rang. "Eunice, first contact since the courthouse months ago. Dad, can we talk? Just the two of us?" I agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory. Public. She arrived looking broken. Weight loss, no makeup, visible stress. Her voice shook. "It was all Stuart's idea. He convinced me you owed us. That you'd been using me. I know now I was wrong. I'm so sorry." Her tears seemed genuine. I listened without interruption. When she finished, my response came measured and cold. "Eunice, you're 36 years old. You're not a child who was manipulated. You made choices. You signed legal documents. You stood in court and watched Stuart attack me and you said nothing. Dad, please. I made a mistake. You made a choice. Choices have consequences. I gave you everything. Education, opportunities, love. My business. You chose greed over family." I paused. "I forgive you, but I can't forget. You're not my daughter anymore." Stuart called hours later, learning Eunice had met with me. "You turned my wife against me, threatening to expose my dirty secrets to destroy my reputation." I stayed calm. "Stuart, I've been an accountant for 30 years. My records are impeccable. My business dealings are documented. I have nothing to hide." Pause. "Then you, however, have $85,000 in unreported income and embezzlement charges pending. Threaten me all you want. Changes nothing." Week later, we returned to Brennan's courtroom. Preliminary ruling hearing. Brennan announced, "Based on evidence reviewed, I'm inclined to dismiss plaintiff's claims against defendant Gibson. Transfer of business ownership appears to have been a gift with no legal obligation for additional transfers. I'll issue formal ruling within a week." Stuart and Eunice sat defeated. Their lawyer had no response. Outside courthouse, Irene and I stood on the steps, same steps where I'd stood, devastated in part 4. But now Daniel beside us, victory visible. Irene's hand found mine. "You did it. We did it." I squeezed her hand. "But it's not finished yet. One more hearing, one final ruling, 1 week away." The dominance was almost complete. That week was strange. Not tense. Inevitable. Stuart and Eunice hired yet another lawyer, filed motions to delay, but Brennan denied them. The outcome was clear. I spent the week preparing not for battle, but for what comes after victory. Morning of the final hearing, Irene and I arrived with Daniel. Different energy than previous courthouse visits. Not dread, completion. In the hallway, Stuart wouldn't make eye contact. Eunice looked at me with something like regret. We entered Brennan's courtroom. Gallery had observers. Word had spread about the Palmer corruption case. Judge Brennan began immediately. This case represents both judicial system failure and correction. Under Judge Palmer, improper orders were issued without adequate factual basis. This court will correct that. She methodically dismantled their claims. No evidence of exploitation. Salary records showed above-market pay. Gift was voluntary, documented, no strings attached. More concerning, Brennan continued, evidence shows plaintiffs engaged in embezzlement following gift transfer, unauthorized bonuses, fraudulent expense reimbursements totaling $47,000. This bad faith conduct voids the original gift transfer under Pennsylvania law. Her gavel hit once sharp. The 40% ownership transfer is hereby declared null and void. Full ownership returns to Defendant Gibson. She addressed Stewart directly. Mr. Callahan, you failed to report $84,700 in business income to IRS. This court cannot impose criminal penalties, but IRS has assessed tax liability of $42,000, including penalties. Additionally, plaintiffs are ordered to pay defendants' legal costs, $28,000. Brennan added one final note. Pennsylvania Judicial Conduct Board issued ruling yesterday regarding Judge Richard Palmer. He is suspended from judicial duties for 3 years with prohibition on holding judicial office during that period. His financial conflicts of interest constituted serious ethical violations. Stewart's lawyer attempted objection. Your Honor, we intend to appeal. That is your right. However, I'm confident Apple Court will find my ruling well supported by evidence. This matter is concluded. The gavel fell. 6 months of warfare ended. I sat still, absorbing finality. Irene's hand touched my shoulder from the gallery row behind. Outside, Stewart stormed off in fury. Eunice lingered. Dad. Just one word loaded with years. I stopped, turned, gave her a chance. I know you'll never forgive me. I just want you to know I understand now what I threw away. I'm sorry. My response came measured, not cruel. Eunice, I gave you every advantage. You chose greed over integrity. I do forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You're not my family anymore. You'll find your way, but without me? She nodded, tears streaming. Are you? Will you be okay? Yes, better than I've been in years. She saw Irene beside me, understood. I'm glad you have someone. She walked away. My daughter, now a stranger. I felt sad but also free. Irene linked her arm through mine. Ready to leave? Yes. Let's go home. 1 week later, I signed papers selling Gibson and Associates to Reynolds and Associates for $850,000. After 30 years building the firm, I walked away in an afternoon. Felt no regret. The firm represented old life, betrayal, pain, time for something new. Irene and I filed paperwork for B. Walsh Gibson Financial Protection Services, consulting firm helping elderly business owners protect themselves from family financial abuse. Using our combined expertise, not about making fortune, about preventing others' suffering, our scars becoming their shields. Through my professional network, I heard what became of Stewart and Eunice, divorced within a month of final ruling. Stewart's consulting business collapsed when forced to sell Palmer's stake. Working now in sales, bitter and broke. Eunice couldn't find work at major firms. Reputation damaged. Staff accountant at small company. Salary $45,000. They each got what they pursued. Isolation and financial struggle. I felt no satisfaction in their suffering, just quiet acknowledgement that justice occurred. Late August evening, Irene and I sat on my terrace in Chestnut Hill, the house they tried to take. Philadelphia sunset visible, city lights beginning to glow, wine glasses, comfortable silence. You know what's strange? I said I gave them everything and they wanted even more. Wanted to take what I didn't offer. Some people can't appreciate gifts. They only understand taking. Do you think she really regrets it or just regrets getting caught? Irene considered. Does it matter? Either way, she lost her father. That's consequence enough. I almost gave up multiple times. But you didn't. You fought. You won. We won. Couldn't have done it alone. She leaned against my shoulder. You're not alone anymore. You won't be again. I smiled. First genuine smile in months. No, I won't be. We watched the sunset together. Not happiness exactly. Too much pain for that. But peace, justice, partnership. 6 months ago, I said quietly, I sat in this house thinking my life was over. What do you think now? That maybe it's just beginning. The city lights grew brighter as evening deepened. Irene's hand rested in mine. New business launching next week. New partnership formed. Old wounds healing, though scars would remain. I'd learned that justice exists but requires fighting for that. Family means nothing without integrity. That being right isn't enough. You have to stand up for what's right. And that even at 64, after betrayal and loss, life could begin again. The story ended not with triumph but with quiet restoration of dignity. And that was enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of the story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.